This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane Pittman and Olgun back with you. I think we're in round 14 of the NBL. I can't quite keep track, but we are on New Year's Eve in Australia anyway. Not quite there yet over here in the US, but it does mean that we've got a doubleheader on ESPN tonight. You've got Cairns and New Zealand. Someone is going to win a game. And then you've got Illawarra and Phoenix, which is a very fascinating game on the back end of that doubleheader. So make sure you check that out on ESPN, your home for hoops tonight. Olgun, you've been at games. You were at Sydney and Adelaide last night, so we're absolutely going to break down what the heck is going on in Adelaide, and also on maybe a slightly minor scale, what the heck's going on in Sydney. Before we do that, Olgun, we do have to say we did do a podcast about 3 days ago. That is on the YouTube feed. So if you're listening to this and you're a fan of Illawarra or a fan of Melbourne or Tassie, go back and watch that one on YouTube and let us know what you thought. We appreciate the support. And anyone that listens to this podcast, hopefully every week, Tuesdays is when we like to put out the podcast, Olgun. Sometimes the schedule might change that a little bit. Hey, before we get into this, because this Adelaide-Sydney game was fascinating. I just finished watching it over here. I do have a question for you. Did you wake up with just a little bit of guilt this morning? Did you feel guilty when you woke up?
About what?
Well, are we colleagues and friends?
Sure.
Yes, and we are building something here at ESPN from the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Nothing but net, a show on ESPN that is from this week moving to 4 days a week. So they're putting me to work, but we connect on that show and we bring news to Hoops fans. Well, you bring the news. I just ask you questions. And this morning I wake up and I see that you're bringing some of your best material about the Sydney Kings to another platform. What's going on, man? That is supposed to be between me and you save your best stuff for the podcast. I was disappointed.
We've got the big show on ESPN. We've got nothing but net Aussie hoops. The problem is I can't control when things come to me. Even, for example, the Josh Adams signing. I couldn't even. It wasn't kosher for me to say it on our pod last week. It was something that had to hold the later that day or the next day, which was very unfortunate. This Sydney King stuff, I wasn't across it to the extent that I should have been at the time. And so, but look, I've flagged that this is something that they were sort of gauging, but obviously it's very more real right now. But yeah, I'm sorry. They asked me last minute to jump on overtime to talk about some stuff, and it just so happened that there was a lot of juice across a lot of teams that was worth talking about. I feel like that's on you. That's on you, man. You gotta get me at the right times.
Disappointed. But I will try and press on for the rest of this podcast. Overtime, by the way, another fantastic program. Everyone should try and check that out. But Olgun, save your best stuff for us. Adelaide. So we'll touch on the Adelaide side of this. They get a win over Sydney last night, 111-96, and certainly offensively, they were awesome again. We've seen that plenty from this Adelaide 36ers team right throughout. But if we even look at what went down in the 2 previous days where they had another loss, and Isaac Humphries is talking about not knowing what the role is, seemingly indicating that there is some issues with Mike Wells, the head coach. Then you've got Montrezl Harrell going crazy on social media again, not for the first time this year. This team is on a skid. They were 7-11 at the time, and it looks like everything's about to completely fall to pieces, and quite frankly, not that surprising if you've been following the Adelaide 36ers over the last few years in the league. But then they come back and have this really nice win on the road. Everyone's smiling. Everyone's laughing. Everyone seems back on the same page. What did you make of it? And what did you make of the lead into that game? And now potentially what it means moving forward?
So the context of the moment is important. So and it starts at the start of the season, right? We remember the Mike Wells blow up, the one that was captured on all those TV cameras. That was interesting because from what I understand, right after that moment, Kendrick Davis was kicked out of practice. And it's not the first time he has been kicked out of practice. There have been some incidences where he's had to leave practice. There have been incidences where Montrezl Harrell has just left practice, whether out of frustration or apathy or whatever. There's been a general consensus among the team that the roles weren't clear throughout the season. And that was from the start of the regular season to now. And all of this culminated in that game against Perth where they got blown out again at home. Isaac Humphries said some, those honest truths after the game to ABC Sport. Montrezl Harrell didn't take kindly to Damon Lowry's comments about him and not being part of that huddle post-game. And so this all ended up in a team meeting that took place in the team hotel the night before the game against the Sydney Kings, where they basically hashed all that out. It was basically putting everything on the table. It was the coaches admitting that, yeah, there is no role clarity. This is something we should have done earlier. It is all the players saying, all right, we have to take ownership about the way we behave and the way we act and how we bring our skill set and our personality to the table. And it was like an understanding that there is like a talented group here that we have to come together, because this won't do. The way we are performing won't do. And I think everyone in the gym yesterday knew that there would be obviously a lift and at the very least like an outburst. And that's exactly what we saw. We saw an offensive outburst from the Adelaide 36ers to start that game. Now, you go through that game, and obviously it's a 15-ish point loss for the Sydney Kings. It got to 29 points at one point. I'm in the camp, and I don't know if this is unpopular, of not reading too much into this game. I thought that first quarter was the really important one, where 36ers, I have my sheet, 32-12 is what the 36ers jumped out to in that quarter. I thought the 36ers made a lot of tough shots. I thought the Sydney Kings missed a lot of good looks. And so when we talk about the sort of foundational issue of this 36ers team, it's been their defense. It's been their ability to guard. They're the worst defensive team in the league. And, this game ends with Sydney or Adelaide allowing 121 points per 100 possessions. That is right around the mark of where Adelaide is defensively, which is the worst in the league. What happened this game is Adelaide just made shots at an anomalous rate. And I asked Mike Wells about this in the press conference. Is this sustainable? And he said that's the key. We have to try to shore up the defensive end, because what we did offensively, which was 54, 52 and splits from the field goal and three, and then 92% from the free throw line on 24 free throw attempts. That's not sustainable. And so this wasn't a great defensive game from the 36ers, according to the numbers. So is this sustainable? I don't know. I don't think so. This feels like a flash in the pan, immediate reaction to a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say one win with such a great offensive performance for a team that we already know is arguably the most talented offensive team in the league is not making me sit up and go, well, this is it. The Adelaide 36ers have turned it around. It was a little bit of a weird game, though, because the numbers are the numbers. And yeah, I agree. I wasn't sitting back and thinking this was prime Tassie JackJumpers locking everyone down or Melbourne United. It wasn't like that. But I would say the first 5 minutes of the game, or really the whole first quarter, there was more attention to detail. There was more energy. There was more effort. There was more communication than we've seen from this team in the past, which all that does do is show you that they can do it. It is, for the most part, it feels like this is whether this team can be engaged enough to put a five-man lineup effort defensively for the stretches in games. The other part to the offensive end of this was I thought the game ended in the final 3 minutes of the second quarter, where Sydney really got back into the game. And then you spoke about some of those difficult three-pointers that Adelaide they went on a run to end the first half. And it just felt like at that point in time, the game was largely done. So the numbers are a little bit all over. And when it's you got a team winning by 30 points at some stage, I don't know how much you look at the numbers and read into it. But overall, the Kings still dominated the offensive glass and weren't able to convert hardly any of those second chance opportunities. 15 offensive rebounds for 14 second chance points. They missed 7 free throws on the game, and they didn't shoot the 3-point ball well, really, outside of Jalen Adams. So, yeah, it could have swung, but nonetheless, this was a Sydney team that was down by 30 points, and I think there's more questions that we'll get to with the Kings. But for Adelaide, it's more about, was this just the injection of, okay, we had a meeting last night, everyone's going to be on their best behavior, and then this is who we are for the rest of the year? Or are we just going to go straight back to when you have a first sign of adversity, potentially against Melbourne this week, and if it's not Melbourne, it could potentially be the game against Tasmania, which is the next game, or Illawarra. So this is the perfect opportunity to look at this team, likely in scenarios where they are behind or under real pressure. Then how do you handle it? Because I still found it fascinating at the end of the game that the Montrezl Harrell post-game interview with Joe Healy, and he's like, yeah, we don't listen to anyone's outside talk. That's all they've been doing all season long. They've listened to everything.
It's funny because that's demonstrably not true.
Yes.
Montrez literally reacted to the outside talk.
Yes.
That's like a demonstration that he's listening to it.
So is that the rule moving forward? That's what I took from that. I'm like, okay, well, you haven't done that. None of you have. So now let's see if you can all be on the same page the rest of the season, because if you can, I think most people believe that this team is talented enough to go on a run here. They're only a couple of games out of the play.
Yeah, I think we've known they're talented enough offensively to do something. Again, the question has always been whether the defense was at a level where they can win sustainably. And that's the key here. And I think of this is an obvious, like, immediate reaction to adversity, this sort of game. And so that's why it's not a complete surprise. Well, like they wouldn't have come in as the favorites to win this game, obviously. The Kings are playing reasonable basketball. They were coming off whatever they were coming off from, like, a drama perspective, and they responded. I wonder if this 36ers team it's emotional. They're full of high passion characters, and I wonder if a performance like this can maybe get them on some sort of run in the same way that 32-12 first quarter gave them a bit of juice, right? Even and credit to them, because when the City Kings came back and brought it back to, I think, 6 points, I thought at that point, all right, the Kings are going to go win this by 20. Credit to them for withstanding that punch and going on another run, and the significance of Dejan Vasiljevic coming on and hitting back-to-back threes. Having someone who has the ability to do that was super important. But they got stops when it mattered, I guess, in that second quarter, and went on a little run, and they stretched it back out. But I wonder if, because of how emotional this group is, I wonder if they could use this to then, use it to as a catalyst into maybe a few more wins, in the same way that they used their first quarter to really continue being on a heater for the remainder of this game. Their emotions are probably the thing that would be the death of them at some points, because I think that leads to some lackadaisical defense. It also could be the thing that could make them look like the Perth Wildcats, who are a really high-powered offensive team who don't really play D, and that can win you some games. Again, I don't think it's going to win the championship, but I could see them go on a little roll here. Do I think this is something? Do I think it's like a healthy, sustainable team? No, but you just have to make the 6, and then at that point, at least from a playing perspective, anything's possible.
I hope they make the 6, because we've said it all season long, for better or worse. And thank goodness I'm not an Adelaide 36ers fan who has to go through this. But they are the most watchable team in the league because of the chaos, because of the carnage, because of the great, because of the not great. They're just must watch. So I hope that when Harold says that from now on they are all locked in. And maybe they are just a bunch of guys that need to use outside motivation. I'm cool with that. Like, I don't care that he wants to snap back at people on social media. Like, that doesn't bother me. I like it. It's entertaining. But what I would say is you don't generally see the great teams do that. You're not going to get that out of Tasmania. You're not getting that out of Melbourne United. We talk all the time how boring that team is. They give you absolutely nothing, even when they go on a 4-game skid like they did 2 weeks ago. So this is just not the usual formula. How many times do you see a championship winning team where 9 games out before the playoffs, one of the key players is like, well, none of us know what we're supposed to be doing. And then the coaches have to sit down and say, yeah, we should have given you guys roles. Like, this would be the most remarkable run that they can go on.
Think of the discourse around Chris Golding's flopping earlier in the season, right?
Yeah, they shut it down.
I think that was orders of magnitude more as far as like the breadth of the coverage of that than this Montrezl Harrell stuff of him not joining the huddle and Damon Lara's comment. And no one responded to that. I think Dean Vickerman sort of gave a general, we have to appreciate Chris Golding for what he is as a player, etc. But I don't think Chris said anything about the discourse around his flopping or anything like that. That team just sort of locked in and moved on. And that's the sign of a team that you feel like you have trust in to win games when it matters. And the other team, it just feels erratic. And again, the swings are what they are. It's what makes this Adelaide 36ers team fun. It means that they can string a few wins in a row, but it also means that probably going to string a few losses in a row.
But because of the erratic nature of Tassie's been obviously 8 in a row, so I don't know if we can include them in this, but everyone else is all over the place. So that gives the Adelaide 36ers a real shot here to go on a run. And if they were going to use the motivation to get themselves up for a game, how about Melbourne United, who picked you because they thought that they could put 120 points on your head? So if you want to get a team motivated to play defense, they better do it this week, because this team is telling you that they think that you can't stop them. So again, you talk about a must-watch game, Melbourne and Adelaide. That's got to be at the top of the list, I would say there. Should we move on to Sydney?
Are you the only person who knows that was is it called a shootout?
Yeah, summer shootout, man. You got to be locked in. You're too busy like spilling your news to other outlets, and you're not focused. You're not focused in on the facts. The summer shootout getting underway.
I'm not focused on the little game within the game that the NBL created.
Come on, man. This is a storyline. You need to sharpen up. Sydney, you did have reporting. Let's get to the reporting. So, yeah, the Kings, again, their record is fine. They're going to be there. But no one is surprised when you see them down 30 points to Adelaide. This has just been the nature of the way this season has gone. You're reporting that they are going to bring someone in before that deadline. Got to play 7 games, obviously, to qualify for the postseason. But it's a guard, not a big man. We can get into that a little bit more after.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Because there is a frame of thought that they should bring in a big man, and replace Cam Oliver. Now, I don't think they're going to replace Cam Oliver. What Oliver is producing and the relationship that he clearly has or doesn't have with the coaching staff and their inability to sort of get the most out of Oliver's talent, that's obviously an issue. And I think that's something that needs to be remedied if this Kings team wants to make a serious run. But do you agree? So that is what the Kings are doing. They're going to bring in a guard, an American guard. This is going to be a low-profile guy. I said it on the broadcast. It's going to be low risk, reasonable reward. Like Ian Hummer is in Tasmania. It's just someone who's going to come in and ideally maximize everybody, not rock the boat. Do you agree with that assessment? Because it's something that Goorjian has obviously been crying out for.
No, my man, Sorty, telling the Sydney Kings. I don't want to put. Okay, all right, fair enough. Well, I like Craig Sword. I stand by that he was a positive player for the JackJumpers. Anyway,
no, so do I. The Kings looking for a ball carrier though, and that's just not. Craig Sword's a different sort of player.
So Cam Oliver, here's my thing with Cam Oliver at this point in time, and I feel bad for. He's been one of the most entertaining imports we've had in the league in the last 5-6 years. So I feel bad that we all aren't getting to see the best of him. But it's very clear now that it's not working. So when I look at the last 4 games, at some point you're like, okay, it's going to get better. He scored 12 points in the last 4 games. He was scoreless last night in 9 minutes. He's sitting at the end of the bench away from the team. And look, the camera shot to him post-game, and he was a guy like giving some sort of address to the team. I don't know what he was saying. But to me, he doesn't look happy. The coach is clearly not getting along with him. I don't understand at this point in time. And maybe he comes out in a playing game because he's that talented and drops 25 points and helps them advance. Like he could do that, sure. But we are 2/3 into the season now, and he hasn't shown it. And it looks like the situation's getting worse. And it is a distraction. Everyone's talking about it every single game. They're asking Brian Goorjian about it. This team does need a big man, and he's clearly not giving them what they would need. So I'm for the better of everyone, including Cam Oliver, who could get an opportunity to play somewhere else and actually be happy and enjoy it. I don't know whether he's not happy, but it doesn't look like he is, and I understand why he wouldn't be. I just don't understand why we don't just part ways, because it's clearly not working.
Yeah, and like I get that perspective. Obviously, there's like a money aspect to it as well. And you have to pay out all of Cam Oliver's contract. I was seated very close to the Kings bench, so I got to see a little bit. I saw Cam Oliver sort of sitting to the back to the side a little bit. There were points during that game though, in that fourth quarter, where Cam Oliver was up and about and very like demonstrative and motivational with his teammates, and so he's not someone who has checked out. I don't think that's a Cam Oliver thing. I think Cam Oliver is like an emotional guy who reacts to highs and lows, right? In the same way that Montrezl Harrell is. I think the hope is that the Kings bring in this ball carrier, and hopefully that helps in maximizing Cam Oliver. The other thing that I saw sitting there was Kelly Le'Apepe suffer his injury. Yeah, looks like a hamstring injury. And I was watching him, and the doctor came over, and he did some sort of test, which was almost like sort of like holding his hamstring and then like pulling his leg out. And as soon as he pulled it a little bit, Kelly sort of like winced in what looked like extreme pain. And I think that was like an acknowledgement to the doctors, thinking, okay, like we understand what this injury is. So I think there's a chance that this is a considerable time off for Kelly Le'Apepe. The minutes from Jason Spurgeon in this game were actually really solid. Like he came on, I thought he played really good D. I thought he set an on ball for Jalen Adams, then set like a gore tut for Adams to get like a layup or a floater. Like he did a good job, but this team is not going to win a championship if Jason Spurgeon is playing considerable minutes. So this is an opportunity for Cam Oliver to step up, because Kelly Le'Apepe, who's played a bunch of 5 for this team, I don't think he's going to be there for. My guess is the next few weeks, just because of what it was no non-contact injury. So this is an opportunity for Cam Oliver, and I hope he relishes it. I hope they lean into him. I hope they find a way to maximize the talent, because we know he's talented. The skill package is there. And I think it's important for this team's long-term prospect.
Hamstring, not knee? Is that confirmed? Because I wasn't sure to watch him.
When he sat down, he was rubbing his hamstring, and then post-game, Gorge said it was a hamstring.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, that would also change the calculus. But again, you're in a window of 1 week here where they have to do things. So I'm just a little surprised. Again, I would love nothing more than for Cam Oliver to take this opportunity, get minutes and find enjoyment. It's just tough watching him and listening to Gorge every single game, asking the questions. Every single broadcast is just zooming in on Cam Oliver on the bench 60,000 times. It's just a massive distraction, and we haven't seen any signs that it's going to get better. So I wonder in those situations, if he's not impacting the team and everyone's fine, then I get it why you would keep him around and hope that the high upside comes back. But it just doesn't seem like it's been a situation that's worked from day one, which is one of the big shames, I think, for the fans across the league. So Sydney, we'll just wait and see. I'm not too stressed out about that situation, but clearly they make an addition. They're looking for some balance. They're looking for some help for Jalen Adams, who he had 41 points in this game and was really, really good. But clearly, Goorjian doesn't have a strong belief, based on his own words, that someone who I thought should be playing more, Shawnee Bruce, is going to be playing a considerable backup ball carrying role.
I mean, it's funny because the way it's described to me is it's going to be like an American Sean Bruce coming in. Like, it's just sort of like what is being described. And look, if you're going to make,
I don't know.
Well, the idea is like, you don't, unless you can get an Ian Clark type who you know is like high character and obviously really talented. Those guys just don't exist in the market right now.
Yeah,
and the really talented ones, they do come with warts. And at this point in the season, where the Kings' record is still above 500. They have the best defense in the league. I don't know after yesterday if they still do, but you know they've had it the entire season. Then they're not broken as a team. There are changes on the margins that need to happen, and there are little remedies that they need to figure out. But this isn't a team that needs an overhaul or needs some high output guy coming in. I don't think that's the case, and so I think that's what this team is seeing. The case for the Sydney Kings going forward is Jalen Adams has a pep in his step, and he's playing really, really good basketball right now. Bulkawal will be back at some point soon. And what I'm told is that when he's back, he will be back. Like this ideally isn't a thing that's being managed. Like when he's back, he's back. You bring in this other import point guard, and you have a really good team that is about to go on a home stretch. Now they've lost their last two at home, but theoretically, you look at the pieces that they're going to bring back into the lineup. Being at home, you would generally bet on that team to win games, especially because of what they can do defensively.
All right, so they're bringing in an import. Another team in the league that is losing an import, that would be the New Zealand Breakers, who have now lost 8 games in a row. Parker Jackson Cartwright suspended for 5 games for just a real shove of the official there. It's not funny, clearly, and not something that you want to see, but there was kind of a
funny.
It was a bit funny. It was a funny shove, no doubt about it.
It's a bit funny. Like the size difference it makes it funny too. Like it is what it is.
Like I understand. Firstly, there is a precedent you need to set that you cannot do that. But in the moment, I chuckled a little bit. But anyway, 5-game suspension. My question for you, just quickly on New Zealand, because we did touch on them on our last podcast. Are they just waving the white flag now? Because without Parker Jackson Cartwright, I know they play Cairns tonight. Cairns has lost double-digit games in a row. Maybe New Zealand wins this game. And, in theory, they're not that far out of the mix. But, gee, it just seems like a long, long, long way away from that team that was 7-3 and second on the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, like you could argue when they chose to get rid of Freddie Gillespie and bring in Taco Fall that was sort of an admission that, like winning isn't like the absolute top priority here. That's just the reality of the decisions they've made. Now they're at a point, 8 losses in a row, losing their best player, one of the best players in the league. I don't see a way that they can go and put a win together, even against Cairns. You look at Cairns is relatively, I think they're almost fully healthy now, or at the very least largely healthy. And I don't think Cairns is terrible. They're just not playing great basketball right now. I don't know when New Zealand's next win is going to come. It's very difficult to see it coming without Parker. He's the nucleus of that team.
Yeah, and Cairns, to be fair, has played some reasonable basketball sometimes it comes in one half, sometimes it's three quarters, and that's why they've been losing games. But they've lost a couple of close games there, and we probably don't want to talk about that game too much because I dare say by the time a lot of people listen to this podcast, the game will be done. But with that being said, a heartfelt congratulations to the Breakers or the Taipans because both teams desperately need a win. So whoever gets a win, congratulations.
And I'm going to say something that might be unpopular, but the Taipans should be better. This is disappointing from the Taipans. And it's disappointing from Adam Ford. Like, these guys should be better than a 14-game losing streak. I understand that the front half of that was largely because of injuries and things like that, but this isn't a team that's built to lose games at this rate. It's just not what they are. They have to be better than this. And I get we give them some leeway because they are a small market team. They don't spend much money. They are young, but this was the plan was to build a young team. And the idea is that you want to build a young team that can also win games. This is a league where the goal, the outcomes you're trying to achieve are wins. And right now, I guess that's not the case because, they're not in playoff contention. So I guess focus on individual development of players. But the goal should be to win games, and they're not doing that. And I think that's disappointing from a team that I think had some potential. And now that they're largely healthy, they should be winning some more games than this. Like, this is disappointing from them.
They need to break the back of the streak. I said it on the last podcast. They look like a team that when things start to go wrong, you can see it in their faces. They just need to get a win. And yeah, maybe this is the game against New Zealand there. And Rob Edwards has to do more. He was bad against Melbourne. If he was a little bit better, maybe they get that win. Same with Taron Armstrong, to be fair, who we know was great at the start of the season, but the Snakes have really dropped off. A team that hasn't dropped off are the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, a team that personally, for me, looking at the roster at the start of the season, said on the podcast, I don't see it with this team. Clearly, things have changed since they brought in Josh King, and I just wanted to rattle off some of those numbers there. So November 1 was the first game that Josh King coached. Since then, they're 7-3. And since then, they've had the third best defensive rating of 108.5. And in that time, since November, that is when the offense in the rest of the league has actually gone crazy. So the league average defensive rating in that stretch is over 117. So they're 9 points, giving up 9 points fewer than the league average per 100 possessions on the defensive end. That was not what this team certainly was built in many circles preseason. The offense has been something that's been ticking along, but they got 5 guys scoring in double digits. They do play for this guy who holds them accountable on the defensive end. So shout out to Josh King, man. Coming in halfway through the season, it was a weird sort of situation where they had the interim there, and clearly, he might have been in the mix to be a coach before it went down, but he's come and hit the ground running, and he's an intense guy from afar, it looks like, and he's got this team playing hard.
Yeah, like the defensive stuff is real. And it's really impressive. It's impressive because it comes with effort, and it's weird that it's taken a new coach to sort of drive the effort of these guys. But like, they pick up full court. Like, teams bring it over the line and get into their actions with like 13 seconds on the shot clock. That's really tough to run an offense if you're doing that consistently. And it's really tough for this Southeast Melbourne Phoenix team to do that over the course of a 40-minute game. The work rate and like the just general fitness it takes to do that over the course of an entire game is really difficult. So credit to them for doing that. I think Josh King's got a ton out of Malik Lewis. I think he's done a really good job of maximizing Geordie Hunter. Nathan Sobey over the past 5-6 weeks is playing really good basketball. I think Josh King has done a good job of figuring out where his spots are on the offensive end. Derek Walton has come back in, coming off probably his best game of the season, and they're figuring out how those two can play together. I want to see more of those two on the floor. Derek Walton's been out with an injury, and then he had an illness. We still haven't seen enough of Derek Walton and Nathan Sobey on the floor together, how they coexist. That was an issue during the Mike Kelly era to start this season. Not so much because since then, just because Derek Walton's been in and out of the lineup. But I want to see more of that. I head to Wollongong, so we're recording this on a Tuesday. I head to Wollongong later today. I drive down there. Cool. I'm excited to see them. I'm excited to see them in person. This is a really important stretch for the Phoenix because it's Wollongong, it's the Illawarra Hawks today, and then if I'm about to pull this up ever so quickly from the NBL app, which everyone should download, dream big, they play Illawarra Hawks, the Sydney Kings, and the Tasmania JackJumpers all on the road. It's a really important 3-game stretch for this team. One, because of just the general record and They're a team that has a good percentage, but they're 9-9. It'd be good to get some of those wins for this team. But also, this would solidify the sort of championship bona fides. If they're able to pick up one or two of these wins, these are tough games on the road. The Sydney Kings are playing with their backs against the wall, so they'll probably get a very determined team there. The JackJumpers are rolling. The Illawarra Hawks are rolling. It's a really tough stretch. If they can get one of these, that's somewhat impressive. If they can get two of them, I'd treat this Southeast Melbourne Phoenix team as more real than I did yesterday.
It's interesting because the first point you made about Mike Kelly, who we discussed at length. Yeah, everyone loves him, but without ever being in a locker room and being in those situations, so there's some conversations I just try and steer clear of and leave it to the former players and guys that have been in there to talk about. But from the outside, you look at it and you say, well, okay, nothing's changed with the personnel. Yes, maybe there's some X's and O's stuff, but this to me is just a group of guys that this coach comes in and they're just like, all right, we buy in, we're playing for you, because they look like they gave up in the first 3 weeks of the season. They weren't playing. They couldn't be bothered playing any defense at all in those first few games. So this is just, to me, a perfect textbook example of bringing a guy in that everyone wants to play for. It's not that dissimilar to Justin Tatum last year when Jacob Jackomas went out. This team looked like a basket case. All of a sudden, for the rest of the season, they're a top 2 team in the league. And we're seeing a similar trend here. And I would argue there's upside, because I think when you look at the team and the rotation, and this was part of the reason, outside of kind of some funky lineups, and I didn't really understand some of the guys they brought in and signed, I also just looked at it and I said, well, you got a next star that's going to be a part of the rotation, your 6, 7, 8 guy. Then you got Owen Foxwell, who's obviously had a big game a couple of weeks ago, but he's an undersized guy. Leaning on him as such a heavy rotation player, I was like, I just think it's going to be tough in such a big physical league. Those guys have been great. And this team, with Derek Walton playing nowhere near the All-NBL guy that he's been in the past, and Nathan Sobey shooting under 40% from the floor, those two guys can get better. This team, offensively, has not really clicked yet. If they do, and they keep playing defense, then they become really dangerous.
Yeah, it was always, and if you ask around the league, the feeling is that they're too talented to not continue to hover around the 6. Even when they started 0-5, it's like this was a team with Derek Walton, Nathan Sobey, Joe Wieskamp, Matt Hurt, Geordie Hunter, and then off the bench they have reasonable depth. It's Angus Glover, like Owen Foxwell, like they have, and Malik Lewis, obviously. So they have reasonable depth, and they have a good enough talent pool at the top. They were more than likely always going to hover around this area. The question was always whether their defense would be at the level, and it was difficult to see that with Matt Hurt and Joe Wieskamp on the same team. It was like you sort of recruit one or the other. You don't recruit both. Josh King's answer to that is, we just won't play Joe Wieskamp that much. And that's worked. You play Malik Lewis. He's a plus defender. He's playing Matt Kenyon a little bit more. He's a plus defender. Angus Glover, I think, started the season like iffy defensively. I think he's picked that up. I think they've put the ball in Glover's hands a little bit more. He's creating a bit. So I think Josh King's done a good job of figuring out what everyone's roles are in this team. Where their optimal roles are, and it's working. And like I said, I think they're too talented at the top to not be in the conversation here. This defense being what it is over this stretch is the thing that makes me think, maybe, I wonder if they can continue to get that offensive output from everyone, especially Matt Hurt. And if Derek Walton Jr. can play at the level that I think we know he can play at, this is an interesting team to watch.
That's why I keep talking about the middle pack in the league right now, and again, like Tassie's won 8 in a row, so they're probably stand to reason. And the fan base is back, Olgun. The fan base has really got the swagger back, because they were a little down in the dumps, and now they're just letting everyone know that this team is back and they've won 8 in a row. But if you're asking me to put the teams in tiers outside of Illawarra and Melbourne, who I still just think is better than that 4-game streak that we saw, I think they'll improve, particularly in this road stretch. But so I've got Tassie, Sydney, and Southeast Melbourne, Phoenix. Right now, based on what we're seeing, because of the defense, I think they're more reliable than the other 3, which is Perth, Brisbane, and Adelaide, so who don't really play defense. So we are going to get to the end of this season, and there is going to be a team that misses out on the play-in where you're just like, damn, there was a 2 or 3 week stretch, there was a month stretch where this team looked like one of the best teams in the league, and they don't even make the top 6. History would tell you it's going to be one of those teams that is not quite, not even close to up to scratch on the defensive end, whether it's Perth, Brisbane, or Adelaide. If you're a Phoenix fan, you can be a little more confident because of what they've done on the defensive end, but it's going to be an interesting run for sure.
And the history also tells us that in the first game of a play-in, you probably don't want to play one of those high-output offensive teams.
That's right.
Because at any moment, one of them can just pop off. Again, and the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix know this all too well with that Brady Manic team, where the Phoenix went into the fourth quarter of that first play-in game with a considerable lead. And then I think they just got Bryce Cotton at the end of that game. And you don't want to face that team. So that's why I think the top two is so important. Because a team like Adelaide, they could have their tails up to start a game and just go and drop a 20-point lead in the first quarter, just because they do have offensive talent. Do I trust them to win a playoff series? No. But a play-in game, that's what a team like that is built for. It's what a team like Perth and Brisbane are built for.
At the very least, try and avoid that 5-6 anyway, and you get a home game, and you're in a better position either way there. Quickly before we wrap it up, I know we were going to talk about Perth, but I just feel like I haven't seen them play a lot. I know they had that win, but Adelaide was the story. So we'll try and get to them perhaps next week. We'll get a closer look at them this week. Just quickly, Tassie and Brisbane. It was an interesting game. We spoke about Tassie a lot, and they pick up the win, and it was pretty comprehensive, really. It was interesting. I tweeted before the game just the schedule for Brisbane over the Christmas period, 4 games in 9 days. That's about as rough as it gets from the NBL. You don't really see that at any point in time, let alone over Christmas. So I think it was, again, Tassie defensively, it's hard because they're such a good defensive team. But I wasn't surprised that Brisbane really struggled to shoot. We spoke about Casey Prather and shooting 62% over his last 9 games. He goes 1 for 7 from 3, 6 for 19 overall. He didn't look like he had his legs. So on paper, it looked like a game that the Jackies could run away with, albeit they didn't shoot the ball all that well. And again, they leaned on Drumic and Majuk Deng, who went 13 for 14 on 2-point shots. They were able to get what they wanted against this Brisbane defense that is porous on fresh legs, let alone perhaps a little bit fatigued. So I thought as much as you get in the NBL, because you can normally throw it out. I know people talk about the Friday, Sunday back-to-backs, but in a condensed period like this is as close as you can get to a schedule loss or a schedule win, however you want to look at it. I just thought on paper this one was a really tough go for the Bullets.
Yeah, and it's the end of this, this low amount of game, this amount of games in a short amount of time for Brisbane. The issues that they were facing, I think, were largely fatigue based as well. Like it's the JackJumpers are the worst team to face in that sort of game. Obviously,
yeah, I would pick, to be clear, if these two played each other in a play-in or a 3-game series or a 5-game series, like I'm taking Tasmania. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking credit away for the win. It was set up. There were added factors.
Yeah, like the Brisbane turned it over a lot, and they couldn't rebound the ball. They gave up a ton of O boards, a ton of second chance points. Those are two things that I think are largely fatigue based, and that just didn't help their cause. It also didn't help their cause that they were going up against a top 2 defense in the league. Like it's just if you're fatigued, it's the worst team to go up against because the Jacksons make you work for your offense. They make you work for points. So it was tough for them. In saying that, the Tasmania, you give them credit, an 8-game winning streak. You can't like wash that away. Like you can't dismiss that. I still think this wasn't like a crazy high quality win though. From the schedule perspective, I think there's one quality win in this 8-game winning streak, and that's the nature of the schedule, and you have to win the games, and credit to them for that. But like as far as them being contenders, like championship contenders, I got to see more. They're playoff contenders for sure, but to win a championship, we got to see more. It is what it is.
I agree, but the more I look at every other team in the league...
Say you agree again, but with more conviction.
I agree, but the more I look at every other team... the more I look at every other team in this league and their roller coaster nature, there is a consistency level that the defense allows you to get. Like, it's real. It's real. I agree with you regarding the win streak, and I feel like I'm more concerned about the other teams than I am absolutely blown away by Tassie right now. But they're doing what they've done in the past. And like I said on the last show, I think that they're more season 1 JackJumpers than last year's JackJumpers just in terms of offensive firepower. Obviously, Magnay is going to come back. And you would like to, in all honesty, you'd like to see more consistency from Milton Doyle. He takes 5 shots in one game, then he takes 20 in the next. I don't know what's going on there. But, they're not last year I was all over it. I'm nowhere near that. But based on the rest of the teams, they're in a mix to be problematic. And as you've said before, you don't want to play this team in a 3-game series. There's no way.
Yeah. The based on the rest of the teams is the key part of what you said. Outside of the Illawarra Hawks, who are rolling and who look to had everything figured out, no other team is great. There are some teams that are good and have the potential to get to that great level, but there are no great teams out there. And so this is a season where a team like the JackJumpers can sneakily just rise up the ladder and do that, just because I think the quality of every team is slightly down. I don't think this JackJumpers team is anywhere close to some of those like championship teams or even championship series teams we've seen over the past few seasons. Like that's just how this season is. But you have to play who's in front of you. You have to play in the season that exists in the current moment, and they're doing that. And again, that's why I think the Brisbane Bullets were okay making a change for James Bateman. They could have just ignored it, rolled with Isaac White, maybe get a random local and brought him in and just be done with it. The JackJumpers didn't have to make a change. They could have kept Craig Sword. The Sydney Kings are making a marginal change. These teams are looking around the league, seeing that there's no great team. Illawarra is one that's sort of pulling away from the pack. Melbourne is still Melbourne, but there's no one that's like an out-and-out favorite. Like there's no Sydney of a few years ago under Chase Buford. There's no Melbourne under Dean Vickerman a few seasons before that. There's not even New Zealand Breakers under Modi Mayor in that season where they lost in 5 games to the Sydney Kings in the Championship Series. Those teams don't exist right now. So I think teams around the league are thinking, all right, a little marginal change on the edges is the thing that could get us to a championship. That's just what this season is.
Yeah, it feels like the title's up for grabs. I can't figure out whether the offensive firepower is better or the defenses are worse. I don't know, but the numbers are crazy. We had Jalen Adams. I was thinking about this just as you were talking there. He had 41 points last night. Remember the days, I'm talking 3 months ago, I'm talking last season, where if a player scored 41 points, it would be back page news. Everyone would be talking about it now. It's like, oh, well, Jalen Adams, congratulations, man. 41's pretty good. We've seen it 8 times in the last 2 weeks. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy what we're seeing this year, and I'm sure it'll continue tonight. Cairns and New Zealand, Illawarra and Phoenix. That is the game that I want to plug into. You know, I'm all over the Hawks, but I think the Phoenix, they've been a team I was wrong on, even when they made the coaching change. I didn't quite see it, but they look like they are getting stronger the season goes. That's on the ESPN, so you're going to be able to catch both of those games. You'll be able to see Olgun on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops. That's Thursday night, leading into another NBL game on ESPN there. And Olgun, if there's one thing I can ask of you, come on Thursday night with a player for the Sydney Kings. Give us a player. Give us a name, and then I will forgive you for going elsewhere with your breaking news.
For all transparency, I don't have the player right now.
I don't bring it on Thursday. Okay,
I'm under the impression that there is a player. So I will endeavor by Thursday to have this name for you. And I will endeavor to break it on Nothing But Net Aussie Hoops.
Yep. Give Paul Smith well, this is probably technically, you're not allowed to do this, actually. So don't do that. I was going to say give Paul Smith a new Hawaiian shirt and he'll tell you who the player is. But I think that is technically breaking some journalistic rules. So don't go and do that. But anyway, this has been the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane Pittman and Olgun Ulich. Let us know what you thought. Get us on YouTube. Get us on the socials. Plenty going on around the NBL. And we'll see you again next week.